There are many different kinds of people in any given workplace, and we try to get along with each other in the interest of getting things done and keeping the work flowing. But sometimes relationships don't work out, and the resulting clash of personalities can lead to toxicity. Managers and leaders whose job it is to help the rest of the team move the ball forward are not immune to this problem, but the bigger problem with that is poisonous leaders take a toll on the workforce. The gradual deterioration of a company is a sure sign of toxic leadership, as are disengaged employees. Hello and welcome to Cool Time Life. I'm Steve Prentice. Each of our Cool Time Life podcasts focuses on a topic dealing with people, productivity, technology, and work life, and each offers ideas and facts you need to know about to thrive in today's busy world. An index of our podcasts is available at cooltimelife.com. Today, I get to sit down with Sean Lemson, author of the book One Drop of Poison: How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company. An intriguing title, to be sure, from someone who has walked a long and detailed path to get to the point where he can advise people on this troubling topic. So let's get right to it. Sean, welcome to the Cool Time Life podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're dealing with a really interesting topic here, one that can be a big elephant in the room. Most people don't like to talk about the bad stuff that's going on, but before we get into some of these key issues surrounding poisonous leaders, Sean, how did you come to this place in space and time? What brought you here?
Yeah, well, I'm in my early 50s, so I've probably changed my career 4 times in my life and evolved from IT work in the beginning when I started my career. And then I became a database developer for a while. And I was really attracted to the Agile principles. I started looking at not just the Agile manifesto, because that's just 4 things, but the principles actually spoke to me in a deeper way because I kind of always had a hobby of human psychology. And when I read the Agile principles, I can almost feel the pain, of the people who wrote them. They're just like, please don't treat us badly anymore. I was very attracted to that. And so I started, I did a switch in my career and became a Scrum Master, and then worked my way up through the world to become an Agile coach. And I think my journey is a little bit different here. It's kind of worth calling out that I was going to abandon the whole thing and I was going to become an executive coach. And I had gone through all of the training. I mean, several thousand hours of training, certification, long retreats, 6-month leadership programs. And and during that process, I realized, well, I don't have to trade. This is actually an agile coach with these skills would actually be very valuable. So I started to practice a new kind of agile coaching where I would not go in and talk about the process as much as I would talk about the psychology on the team. I just have a core belief that if I could get the team to like each other as human beings, like the work they're doing, that the agile stuff would just kind of work itself out. And that's pretty much my experience. So what led me to the book was I've been doing that work for almost a decade. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I took some of the worst teams at companies that I work with and turned them around. They used to call me the team whisperer. They could drop me on a team that had like no people wanted to quit. Nobody wanted to be there. The work was terrible. They had quality issues, and I could turn it around. If you gave me a couple months, I could turn it around. And I did that over and over again. I'd even gone on to teams where I was the third coach to go. And the previous 2 coaches before me had not been able to do it. And then I did it. And so it really reaffirmed my belief that this psychology approach was the right approach. But what would happen inevitably is that I would spend these months working on these teams and make them perfect. And then some senior leader from up above would just come in and blow it up. Just, oh, it's time for a reorg, or we're going to move these people over here to this team. And it got so frustrating for me. I would say, why am I spending all this time on these teams when the leaders, if they don't align with the same belief that I have about psychology, they're just going to blow it up. They're going to do the wrong thing. And that happened over and over again to the point to me and also as a coach to the teams I was working with. So I decided enough was enough. And I have read, I don't know how many leadership books, as I'm imagining you have as well. There are thousands of them, and they've been saying a lot of the same things since the 50s. So I decided that what was missing was someone needed to tell leaders what they needed to hear and not what they wanted to hear. And so my book is written a little bit differently. It's written from the side of, hey, you might be a good person, but you're doing the wrong thing at your company, and it's costing your company a lot of money.
So you have, as the team whisperer, this capacity now to get through to people very clearly, and you're seeing something that the team members either cannot see or do not want to admit that they can see. At the risk of asking a question with a potentially obvious answer, why does poisonous leadership matter in this day and age?
Well, I think it matters for people to understand it in these terms because they're not thinking about it in these terms today. One of the reasons why this is so insidious is that some of the worst leaders at companies are actually look like they're delivering results, right? Like their teams are delivering the outcomes. They are achieving the targets, whatever those targets are for their goal, for their organizations. So from on high, it looks like these are great leaders. But that metric of measuring leadership isn't healthy here. It's not useful. It doesn't do any good if my teams are reaching their targets if 30% of them want to quit afterwards, right? And 30%, the other 30, another 30% of them want to quit and stay, which is even worse, you know? So we have this disengagement problem. We have the quiet quitting thing. I know you've mentioned several times, which quiet quitting is just doing the job you were hired to do and nothing more. But companies continually ask me, hey, help us get our teams to be higher performing, and then I get in and find out, well, you have all this subtle toxic behavior going on at your leadership team. I'm not going to be able to get human beings to perform better if we don't address that.
I think it's safe to say that most people who work at a job would like to work at a place where they feel respected and where the work is fulfilling. But let's say you have a leader who is exhibiting these poisonous behaviors, maybe emulating these rock stars that they admire, and who may not be aware of the damage they are causing. What do you do?
Well, I often ask a trick question when I'm working with leaders, and I'll ask them, what do you think, what is the one thing that all successful leaders have? And they'll give me the typical answers, courage, aspiration, hard work, whatever. They give me all the Hollywood answers. Uh, but the real answer is followers. Leaders have followers. Okay. The followers are people who are willingly following you, not because they have to, not because they're getting a check to do that, but because they want to. And when I see that's how I know that, so I'm staring at a good leader. I'm staring at a good leader when I see people who would do anything for that leader, right? They don't need to go in and move the cheese every five minutes to the next corner they want all their team members to go. They just tell the teams what they want, the outcome they want, and their teams go, and they do that because they want to, not because they're being told to. So, I mean, I would just say that toxic leaders often are good people. These are not, I just want to be clear here. We're not talking about evil people. There's a small subset you could argue. I think the number's around 8% of senior executives that are considered to be sociopathic, which they're just incapable of empathy at all. It does certainly, the current, corporate incentives do seem to maximize the benefit of having no empathy, but that certainly isn't going to get you followers. So I think most people who are toxic leaders are toxic leaders without by accident. They're doing the best they can with what they know. They have incentives of their own. The company has a culture that's driving them to behave a certain way. They get rewarded for certain kinds of behavior, and then they learn that this toxic behavior is that. Well, first of all, they don't think of it as toxic behavior in the first place. They think of it as, I'm just doing my job and I'm a great leader because I always check the box and my leader likes me. That's not necessarily so that the point of my book is, hey, you could be a great person doing all the things you think are right and still be toxic to your teams at a very psychological level and not realize that you're doing that.
Good point. So it may be a situation of blind poisonous leadership. So how would we approach that? How could I go and tell this individual that they are poisoning the well?
first of all, there's two ways, right? One, you need to be, hopefully your company is gathering engagement information more often than annually, and that you have at least enough psychological safety, or there's enough anonymity in that process that you can talk about your engagement at the company. So as an employee, that's how you can make yourself heard. But it's really more for the leader to spot the toxic behaviors that they're having. I mean, we probably should talk about the leadership mindset here, because I know those things come up, that word comes up a lot, but I have a very specific definition of what makes up a leadership mindset. It is values, principles, and beliefs, right? All three of them. Values are, I value this over that. I value peace and quiet over loud environments. I value, some people say I value loyalty, which is, that's already, I start to perk up when I hear that. And then there are beliefs, and beliefs are things like, there's never a cop around when you need one, or, whatever story you tell yourself, people work better under a deadline, whatever these little catchphrases we have about how we define our belief structure. We can't prove it, but we believe it. And then principles are kind of the commandment version of both of those together. Like, I never tell a lie, right? Or I always tell the truth is more of a principle, a way of thinking about your values and beliefs. Well, we're all operating with a mindset about leadership. We all have values, principles, and beliefs that make up who we show up as a leader. We've either had it demonstrated by our parents, we've had leaders in our lives who've shown us the right way, and we've seen it work. Um, and what I see these leaders doing is they have kind of a messed up value system for leadership that corporate America and many companies is driving into them. To not value, to think of human beings as euphemisms, human resources, human capital, my least favorite one ever. Um, that one, it sort of makes it easier for me to go, well, 10 less of you will save me this much money, without thinking, yes, those are 10 people whose lives you're now going to upend.
Yes, it seems to be a sort of a dual exercise then. Or is the onus more than just on the individual to do self analysis? I'll give you a modern case study. One of the components of being a leader in the age of AI, an augmented leader as it's called, is where leaders can use tools like sentiment analysis of conversations that occur during meetings or one on ones. This AI tool can work through the audio or text transcript of conversations and derive a sense of the emotional state of the individuals or of the team. So there seem to be some interesting opportunities to use AI to help leaders do what they don't have the awareness or skills to do on their own, to sit down and actively listen to their people and understand them. Would you say that in this AI-driven era that the onus is now even more on leaders, regardless of how they perceive themselves to be, to do a regular self-check, a regular feedback opportunity to ensure that they are not drifting into poisonous territory?
Yeah, I would actually go one step further. So, yes, I would say that it's up to leaders to do this self check. And for me, that self check comes by, I guess you could say that engagement scores are like the equivalent of looking over your shoulder to see if you actually have followers. Right. So, that's one thing that I would do if I were a leader, is I'd continually be checking. But I would go one step further and say that companies need to make sure they instill that all the way down, because I've had plenty of leaders who, if they had had a leader who didn't reward the behavior. So, just an example, in my book, I talk about these 10 archetypes of toxic leadership. And one of them is the peacock. And these are people who, when they're with their leaders, they spread their wing, they spread their feathers and talk about how great they are and how great their teams are. But when they get to their teams, all they do is peck at them. And, they're just, they're all upward, leading upward, pushing upward, trying to show good optics upward. Um, that kind of leader would never succeed in a company where their leader didn't let that work. In other words, if I have a, if I'm bringing you these great wins, but my engagement scores are terrible for my teams, then my leader should say to me, these wins are great, Sean, but the problem is you're bringing us these wins with 2/3 of your teams not wanting to work here anymore. Right. And it costs us a lot of money to recruit and train these people. So actually, all the money to replace the people who are leaving is costing us more than the wins you're bringing us. right? And if I were a leader, it's really important that these leaders continue to hold their leaders that are underneath them uh, to those standards, and not get lulled into the fact that this leader below you just brought you this wonderful PowerPoint presentation that seems to have all these wins on it. But oh, by the way, they have no followers. That should be a big problem for you if you have leaders that work for you who don't have followers.
From a historical perspective, are you seeing a shift? Overall, do you see any changes in this decade from the before times, before peak COVID of 2020, 2021? Are there more Satya Nadellas in the world following his lead in terms of wanting to know and love his followers? Well, actually, before you answer that, do you like Nadella's style? Does he represent the kind of thing that you would want to promote in a toxic organization or to avoid a toxic organization?
Well, I like his style, but he's an example of the cautionary tale I'm giving, which is that, that style has to be pushed all the way down. And I know people who have worked at Microsoft for decades who would tell me there is a lot of dysfunction as you move down the organization. So the farther you get away from him, the more you start to see some of these toxic leadership types. And it takes a vigilant look to make sure. I mean, it's almost like, think of it this way: when I bring on somebody on my below me who has the ability to promote and hire other leaders, right? So in other words, I have a leader. That leader has the ability, the maybe even the responsibility to promote and hire other leaders below me. If I'm toxic, if I'm behaving toxically, I'm going to look for people who think like me, who think of leadership like I do. And this is one of the reasons why I called the book One Drop of Poison: How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company, because what happens is that leader brings in other leaders who think just like that leader. And because they don't think of their behavior as toxic, they don't realize they're adding more toxic leaders below them. And before you and this is very costly to companies. This is the real point that I want to make in the book, is that we're not measuring this stuff on our P&L. We're not measuring, how many innovative employees we have. We're not measuring what I call shower time, right? Do people care about your company enough to think about the problems of your company while they're in the shower, right? Or are they in the shower thinking, forget this place, man? So it's just where are their heads? When you have followers, they want to help you. They want to solve your problems. And it's a little bit of a leap of faith when I'm talking to leaders to say, hey, I know that your urge is to just tell everybody what to do, but just imagine how much more performance you would get from them if you just told them what you wanted and gave them the autonomy to solve the problem. So to your question, I just want to just say that trickle down. I love the way that Microsoft is headed at the top. I just want to. I really feel like it's a vigilant act all the way down. You really have to be vigilant about watching for toxic leaders. And that's tied to it can be tied to, sorry, just one more thing about that. It can be tied to incentives at the company as well. So for example, something like the HR group could set up a way with which employees are reviewed. And then that review process could incentivize employees to push for behave certain ways so that they can get a raise. And those kind of little incentives are the things that push leaders to act the wrong way. Uh, and frankly can even push employees to act the wrong way. It's what defines a culture. So, you know, Satya can do all the right things at the top, but if we don't also address these incentives that come through corporate policy and how they cause our leaders to behave, which then cause our employees to behave a certain way, we won't make the change that I think needs to be made.
My final question is about generational differences, because we know we're always going to have a new generation of leaders coming in, working their way through from their 20s into their 30s and so on. So, do you observe any particular changes in attitude, competence, behavior, or socialization in the newest generation of young leaders as compared to their predecessors, either better or worse?
Here's the interesting thing generationally, right? Some of the stuff we're working off of about what good leadership is and what motivates human beings has been known since 1950. Okay. I mean, theory X and theory Y was 1960. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was late 40s. I mean, we could just go on and on. We've been saying, those of us who coach leaders, have been using the same material. Since the 70s, we've known that money doesn't incentivize people, for example, in knowledge work anyway. And, so we have all these answers. It's really weird that we have people who are in Gen X or boomers who are in leadership positions who are still clinging to the other way, the old, what I would call theory X leadership, when we have so much data to say that the other way is better. So that tells me that we have incentives that are working against us and working against them. And I would say that the problem we're having with the younger leaders that are coming in now is they aren't getting the training. I would even say this has happened to older leaders as well. They didn't get the training. They got rewarded for being good widget makers, right? I'm the best widget maker, so I get promoted to be in charge of widget makers, and then suddenly I learn my job is totally different, right? It's leading widget makers is very different than making widgets. And I think what happens, we are making them like, here's a trend I'm seeing right now in corporate America, where we're trying to take younger leaders and we're trying to make them both individual contributors and leaders. So I worked with a company that just switched the title around. They took engineering managers and made them managing engineers. And when they did that, they're like, "Oh, well, you're a great engineer. Most of your job, we want to be hands-on keyboard. We want you coding. But oh, by the way, you're also the leader of this team of developer." It's like, it sounds so fantastic on paper, but number one, you're not preparing that young leader for actual leadership. Right? You're not taking that. It's a completely different set of skills. So I think that young leaders just need the training that older leaders didn't get. We need to start, and that's actually one of the goals of my company, is to try to create leadership uh, workshops where people who are just starting, who kind of want to get the right mindset about leadership before they go into it, they can learn it.
So for those who want to learn more about toxic leadership and maybe spot it in their organization or maybe even in themselves, let's just revisit the book and also where people can find you online.
Sure. So the title of the book is One Drop of Poison: How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company. And I think it's a different kind of book than other leadership books you'll read, because I like to say that I'm the coach that will tell you what you need to hear and not maybe what you want to hear. And I like to think it's a little bit humorous as well, or at least I try to throw some humor into it. You can find me on LinkedIn primarily. Just look me up, Sean Lemson, and I spell Sean like Sean Connery, SEAN. Let's see. And my company is motivatedoutcomes.com. And I have a YouTube channel under Motivated Outcomes. So if you go on YouTube, you can search for Motivated Outcomes. I've got some pretty good videos up there about leadership and team performance, and there's a lot more coming there.
Yes, I can certainly attest to that. I've watched a few already. What you have there is a great example of modular, iterative learning, something I'm very passionate about. So all that remains to be said, Sean, is to thank you so much for joining me here today on the Cool Time Life podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really had a good time. Thank you.
If you have a comment about this podcast, feel free to drop me a line through the contact form at cooltimelife.com. A full listing of our past Cool Time Life episodes is available there too. I update the episodes regularly so that the concepts do not get dated. So check them out and download whatever feels good. And if you feel you are getting value from this series, please leave a review and tell just one more person about us, or mention us on social media. And if you want, you can support us on Patreon. Contributions from our listeners allow me and my team to spend more time researching and preparing our podcast series. So if that feels fair to you, please visit patreon.com/Steve Prentice. Until next time, stay safe, and thanks for listening.